Well, do you guys want to talk about fear and shame and non-monogamy?
Fear, shame, shame. I'm gonna live forever. Shame. I'm gonna learn how to cry.
Welcome to Mistakes Were Made, a podcast about non-monogamy for messy people like us. I'm Sarah, a queer therapist, writer, and journalist.
And I'm Alex, Sarah's husband and the father of her children. I'm a communications professional and educator.
And I am Jessica, here producing the podcast and resident monogamist for the team.
Thank you for being here, Jessica. We're back after we had a short break for the holidays and requisite winter illnesses that swept our households. You might have heard in our last episode that I had fucking pneumonia.
Way to push through there, babe.
Yeah, I don't think I knew it at the time, but I sounded like shit and felt like shit. And I feel much better now. And we're here.
Happy New Year.
In the new year, 2023.
Truly the future now. We were talking about this the other night. Of all of the years that have passed, I feel like 2023 most acutely feels like a ridiculous year to be living in.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, and it's like none of the things came true that you imagined. And then I'm like, oh, wait, there's like billionaires in space, and there's like tiny computers in our pockets.
And people are just like flying by on hoverboards.
People are flying by on hoverboards. There's like a pandemic that swept the world. I'm like, oh yeah, no, that's kind of like the future we imagine. Interesting.
I heard that non-monogamy was out in 2023. Didn't you send me a thing that said that?
Totally, I did.
Which is weird because I feel like monogamy is going to be out in 2023, but maybe I think to be on trend and like ahead of the curve of trends, people often make predictions where they're just like, everything's going to go exactly back to the way it was before. And that thing that used to be cool is gone. It's like skinny jeans are baggy jeans again, and non-monogamy is monogamy again.
I love it because I came into the kitchen and I'm like, Alex, this lady who's very cool is predicting that non-monogamy is going to be out in 2023. It's not cool anymore. And you're like, non-monogamy was never cool, Sarah. It wasn't cool before, it's not cool now, and it's not going to be cool in the future.
Right.
So I don't know why you're doing it.
Yeah, it's definitely not cool. Don't you think that lady probably just met somebody that she liked? And that completely dictated her, She was just like, oh, maybe I could settle down with this person.
Anyway.
Yeah, on to today's episode.
It's kind of apropos because we're talking about the title of today's episode is Why Don't You Just Stop Being Non-Monogamous? What a mess. And backing up a little bit to how we get to the question of why don't you just stop, which for the record, I think if you're non-monogamous is something you've probably asked yourself or your partners ask you or people who just like know you and your relationships might say on a regular basis is that, why don't you guys just stop? Or when are you going to stop? Or will you ever stop? Like, that definitely is a question that comes up a lot.
Right.
And so Alex and I were thinking about how it comes up in our relationship, and specifically around a dynamic that I think shows up with us and in other non-monogamous couple clients that I see.
So, okay.
That was all very cryptic. Unpack that, Jessica.
I'm like, what? Now, what? Can you tell me what
the fuck are you talking about?
Happened?
Alex and I had a fight.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah. What happened?
Well, didn't you hear the fight through the floor? No, just kidding.
No, because nowadays when you and I fight, we just like sit very quietly and are like, I am activated right now. And the feeling that I'm having is one of activation.
Yeah, it was a very subdued fight. It was punctuated by our son coming in, showing us stuff that he'd made on Toco Life every 15 seconds. So it was really a lot of catharsis there. But I think it was a fight that we've had before. Like, it's a dynamic that we really have that repeats a lot in our relationship, and especially since we've been non-monogamous, but maybe even before that. And I think it started with you and I both have a couple of first dates coming up this week, and we were actually not talking about them specifically, but this often happens. I feel like so much of life as this modern life, especially with children and being non-monogamous, is like scheduling.
Right.
We're just like trying to schedule a thing, and then it's like some emotional content comes up.
We're like, wait, what's the thing you're scheduling?
Yeah. What are you doing?
I'm just remembering that not only was our son coming in interrupting us about Toca Life every 15 minutes, but then a member of our chosen family and neighbor who lives a block away and her daughter just like showed up unannounced.
Oh, yeah.
And just like walked in and they're like, where is everybody? And I'm like, we're fighting in the bedroom.
Fortunately, we have a lock on our door. Yes. But yeah, so I was mentioned to you, or like confirmed for you, that I was going out with a new person on Saturday. Listeners, I'll let you know how it goes on the next episode. I mean, I guess tell me about how that was for you.
You know, this is part of what hopefully we'll be talking about today. Sometimes there will be like a new person that you're going on a date with. And I think I've talked about this on the show before. New people are the hardest for me. It's just like absolutely across the boards has very consistently been true, that with every new person that enters, and it's kind of true for me too. Like dating new people, going on first dates is like kind of hard for me and scary. You doing it is hard for me and scary. There's just like that sense of the unknown and like, anything could happen. I think with you, there's often a fear that I have that like, well, this is it. This will be the perfect person. And they'll go on a date and they'll be like, this is the person I've been waiting for my entire life to be monogamous with, start a new family with. Let's just text the old one out of politeness.
I don't even come home from the date. I'm just like...
A nice, put me on a group text,
I'll send you a text
and block my number. And it's always like, that's an exaggeration, but it's just pretty consistently from the beginning. The more you go on dates with people, or the more I go on dates with people, like the more that feeling lessens. And when I'm not activated, I can joke about it. And I'm like, obviously that's fucking absurd. But when I am, it feels like very scary. And then I think it can kind of intersect with other things. Like if the person is like, doesn't have a lot of experience with non-monogamy, for example, it will be a little scarier for me.
Right.
If I am going through a period where, as we'll talk about later, I'm not feeling like my best self. I've been like sick and been through some hard shit, and just noticed today that I only have like one pair of pants that don't have holes in them and one bra that the elastic isn't broken on. And you're like, oh,
and then I show you their profile and they clearly own like 2 or 3 pairs of pants.
Right. And I'm like, her teeth are so straight. And her eyes are so glittery. And she's also like younger than me. And of course I imagine someone that has none of the problems that I have. As I'm getting activated.
I'm sure she doesn't have any problems at all. I'll find out.
Can I ask you guys, like, what kind of deals or like agreements do you have around this stuff? Like, is there any kind of like, I don't know, limit to how often one of you can go on a first date? Or is it like Alex always goes on dates on Thursdays? Or like, do you guys have any kind of like default?
We're kind of anarchists. It's whatever. Like, send a text if you're going to run away with a new person you went on a date with. No. We don't have any hard rules like that around quantity. I mean, I think just practically speaking, there is some limits. But that's an interesting idea, like this being a thing that's hard for you. Like, maybe it would make sense for it to be constrained a little bit. It's not like that many people want to go out with me anyway, so.
We've gone through periods where we've tried that, and I think like the general complexity of our life makes having too many like hard structures like that in place difficult, and also it inevitably involves other people who also have complicated lives, you know?
Yeah, and we only want to be dating people with complicated lives because otherwise we might be too interesting to them or something, you know?
That is such an interesting insight into the way your mind
I think
works.
it's true, though.
I love that you are...
I mean, I'm joking about the second part of it, but I do think that we're generally speaking, we're looking for people who like have a lot going on, have like interesting careers, probably have families and other like, you know, important relationships in their lives. Like there's a lot there. But I do think that we have some it's not like we don't, like, there are some kind of tacit agreements. Like, for instance, you were looking at the person's profile. Like, usually we, like, share the profile, like, look, you know, let the other person look at the profiles of
So we
people
could
that we're going
recognize
out
them in a
with.
lineup.
Yeah. Exactly. When whoever disappears, and there's, like, communication stuff, I think, around first dates, like, you know, checking in partway through, you know, certainly, like, kind of basic safety stuff around just, like, where are you going? I feel like sometimes we, like, send like, this is this person's number.
I usually do that. You don't usually do that to me.
No. So often I don't have their number.
Which, again, I think sometimes speaks to our different orientations towards first dates, where I'm like, I might get killed. And you're like, this is probably going to be fun.
Yeah. Yeah, usually I'm not worried that I'm going to get killed. Although, I have gone on not one but two first dates where the person had a gun. So, it could go any kind of way. Yeah. Maybe we should just wear a bulletproof vest.
Those were wild days.
Yeah.
It was like high pandemic times, and you kept meeting people, like, at the chop at, like, Cal Anderson. It was like an armed standoff.
Literally, that time I was, like, making out with a person on the grass at Cal Anderson, which is dangerous enough in and of itself. And then I was like, oh, what is that? And it was their gun that was in a holster on their wrist.
Whew. Whoa.
Yeah.
But we digress.
Well, we do.
But so it's interesting. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess coming back to the topic, it's interesting that you do have these sort of, like, practices around new people where you, like, share information about them. It seems like it's very, like, open communication prior to a first date, but that somehow it often also is distressing. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it distressing for both of you?
Well,
like,
I think we should talk about that. It's like sort of an escalating spiral of distress, I think is how I would describe it. Because, like, so what happened yesterday, like, I mentioned that date, and then you were like, can I see her profile again? And then you said a lot of kind of self-deprecating things, comparing yourself to her.
Yeah, this all sounds right so far.
And sort of gently threw my phone.
I tossed your phone.
Tossed my phone lightly.
About 18 inches away from me.
While exclaiming something.
Crossed my arms, and I was like, why are they all so young and pretty?
Yeah. So it was like a small tantrum. Yeah. I would describe it as.
I was being a little shit. I think it's the technical term.
A little shit.
I mean, it's like also... The technical term is I was, like, feeling activated, and I acted like a little shit.
Right. And in response, I too got activated and was like, you know, the feeling, I guess I can't remember exactly how I responded, but probably in a sort of, like, finger waggy way. But what I was feeling was like, oh, I'm doing something wrong. I shouldn't have scheduled this date. Sarah's saying she doesn't think I should be dating this person. You know, it's making her miserable and unhappy, and I'm the cause of that, and that's because I'm a bad person and a bad husband.
Yes, I believe what you said was, why do you have to do this every single time?
I think I said, why do we have to do this every time? But I guess it's the same anyway.
But I appreciate knowing what was going on in your heart.
Yeah. Sure. And then how did you feel when I said that?
And then I was like, God damn it, like, this actually doesn't happen as often as it used to, and when it does happen, it's pretty small and contained. Like, I will always have a moment of some kind around a first date, and sometimes that moment will be like, having a moment around this first date, will you just, like, tell me, like, 10 things that are great about me, and then you do, and I'm like,
yeah,
okay, right? And sometimes I have a moment around a first date, and I'm like, Jessica, I'm having a moment around Alex having a first date. Can we have a drink on the porch? And then we go out there and usually end up talking about something else entirely, and I'm fine. And then on occasion, I'll have a moment when it intersects with a lot of other stressors,
right,
where I get activated.
Like we knew somebody was coming over, and our kids were like,
we didn't actually know she was coming.
Well, okay, yeah, we had a vague sense that things were going to happen, and our kids needed stuff from us, and it felt like we had a constrained amount of time, and we were just like, let's figure out the schedule for next week, blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
The Christmas tree had to be taken down, which is everybody's favorite January activity.
We fucking got through that, and
it was,
it's behind us.
So what I want to say is the way I felt when you said that was I'm actually have gotten pretty good at managing this. Like, it is always a thing for me, but whereas when we first started, there would be like tears or like big activations that lasted for a long time. Now it's like pretty contained, and like on occasion I might act like a little brat for some period of time, but it's not that big of a deal. And I felt like totally unseen. Like, to you, me having done all of this like work that was beneficial to me to like become more regulated around this means that if I'm ever dysregulated, all of that is not seen at all.
Well, and stepping back a tiny bit, no matter how contained it is or how many times we have that kind of interaction, and then like you kind of tell me like, you know, it's not a big deal, I just need to have that, you know, I just get activated sometimes and I need to have that reaction in some way, shape, or form. It's still, I still like do the same response thing of being like, you know, what I just said, like, I'm doing something wrong, I feel just like, you know, a bunch of shame about it, and like, you know, you're telling me that I'm bad, right?
And this was where it got interesting and like sort of, I think, telescoped out for me, because then there was this like kind of moment that felt very familiar where I was like, well, I get scared and freaked out, and that means that like I'm bad and you don't love me. And you're like, my behavior and who I am is what causes you to be scared and freaked out, and that means I'm bad and you don't love me. And then we're both kind of just sitting there like, well, and then inevitably you will be like, well, we don't have to do this at all. Why don't we just stop, right?
Right. Which is, I mean, it's not what I said in this case. That's, we've gotten there in the past, but I said a version of that was just like, this date isn't important, I can cancel it, I don't need to go out with this person, it's not a big deal, whatever.
Right.
Like, just pull the plug.
Pull the plug, why don't you stop, let's not do it.
Yeah.
And then I said, what I inevitably say, which is,
I don't want to stop.
yeah. I don't want to stop, I don't want you to not go on the date.
Right.
And that is when I had this moment where I'm like, oh, I have been in this moment with a lot of clients before too. Or individual clients who are non-monogamous have described similar types of moments.
Right.
I was like, what is this moment about? What is going on here? And that got me curious about talking about it on the podcast.
It's funny that it's occurring to me now that we had the idea to talk about this, to do an episode about this, before having that fight. And then, you know, we knew that we were going to record the episode today. It was not in my mind at all that we were like doing the exact same thing, you know, that we had recognized in a cold state, like not in a not freaked out fight state. And we just still did it again, which I guess is just to say it's hard to escape those dynamics, and like the feeling of, you know, when you feel activated and you're not like, it's just so, you know, it's like in those cases, it's always like one of us or both of us should in theory just like be nice to the other one and like, you know, kind of come to them with like
a lot of understanding.
With a lot of understanding, because we know that we're capable of that, but it's really hard to do that
when you're both activated.
When you're both activated, yeah.
And it's and we've gotten, I think, much better at doing that when one of us isn't.
Yeah.
But if both of us
and that's
are,
why Jessica didn't actually hear the fight through the floor, because it was very, very subdued.
But I mean, it's interesting that like, I think to like the lay person, or like an initial reaction to the idea of non-monogamy that I hear all the time and see on social media all the time is like, that sounds really hard. Why would you do that? Right? My life is like complicated and hard enough already. This, you know, and then I think you guys have done such a good job here, and like it's upsetting kind of to think about. Like, I'm picturing myself like scrolling through someone's like dating profile that my husband's gonna go on a date with. That sounds horrible.
Right. And you saw me yesterday. We talked yesterday. You know, I was in a horrible mood. I was like, this is like some deep Sunday, January, everything is a mess. I don't know the last time I showered. Fucking vibes. You know, and then you're scrolling through, like, your partner's gonna go out and it's like just the most glittery, attractive, charismatic, charming, youthful, not worn out looking people you've ever seen in your life.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it's also really easy to access like I mean, like, I'm excited about going out with that person, and everything that you both just said is also true. And that's like kind of the root of the like, oh yeah, what a shitty thing to do to your partner who you love, you know, is to like force them to experience that, or like whatever, like cause them to experience that.
And then that, like, hearing you say that makes me so sad, because it's not a thing you're doing to say, you know?
Right.
Like, yeah.
And the whole point is sometimes...
Wait, it's not?
Well, it's not. It's not.
How is it not?
Okay, we're going to get into that, I swear.
Okay,
I have faith that we will be able to get inside of that. It's not because...
I feel like a lot of listeners are like, yeah, it is.
Well, yeah, I mean...
It's the more relatable
whole...
perspective culturally from a monogamous perspective.
Right.
Like, it's more relatable from a monogamous perspective that it would be really hard for your partner to have to confront the people that you're attracted to and going on dates with and thinking about getting involved with.
Yeah. So I think this might be a good time to talk about your first date this week, just like to add a little bit of a context to the relationship, to the dynamics here, because it's not always this way.
I'm a little bratty shit.
No, I'm not saying that at all. It's just like we're talking about a dynamic where the two partners are kind of like different around these things, and I don't think those always break on the same like gender lines or whatever. It shows up in queer relationships, I'm sure, as well, and maybe it doesn't show up at all, but it's what you're saying, it's pretty common with your clients too. So like, let's hear about the flip side of that, because you also have a first date this week with someone who is much younger than you, who is very attractive. And what's up with that?
What's your point?
Well,
Why are we even talking about that?
I mean, you want me to talk about my perspective on that? Or,
Yeah, I wouldn't.
okay, well, one thing
hear the
is, I mean,
parallel.
it is, your first date is with a woman, so maybe that changes the dynamics a little bit, but I don't think it's all that. But like for me, I'm capable of jealousy around that, but I also know that like your corresponding emotion to like my excitement about my date is your like overwhelming feeling is of kind of like maybe nervousness or skepticism. I mean, you tell me, why am I describing your
I mean,
your
it's just
feelings
fear. Like, it's fear that I'll be compared to the person and come up short.
Right.
Fear that like it'll be a connection that will be threatening to what we have. Fear that it'll be disruptive in some way.
You're talking about with your date?
No.
Oh, okay.
Yours.
Yeah. What are your feelings about your date?
My date.
I feel like you're avoiding talking about this.
Yeah, right?
Let's go back to Alice's dates. Yeah, it is hard for me to talk about it because I'm embarrassed by how hard it is for me to access feelings of excitement about a first date. Like, I think of first dates, and even really the first couple of dates, as things that I kind of have to get through in hopes that something good might be there. It's hard for me to just like take them as they are and be like, it's a new person, and it's exciting that it's a new person, and I'll just assume it's going to go well.
Right.
And there are glimpses of that, and I think I have been able to access that more the longer that we've done this, because I have a larger sample size, and I know that things can go all kinds of ways, and in all cases, you have control over the stakes, right? Like, I can decide that this first date is a low-stakes experience where, if nothing else, I get to have like some beer and burgers with a new person, and that'll be interesting. But it's pretty hard for me to access that, and I often feel like I'm kind of like trying to pump myself up and pump my enthusiasm up for a first date, kind of no matter what.
Yeah. That's interesting. I was going to make a joke a minute ago about how like I like first dates because the new person doesn't know all about my bullshit. And I can like, fake like I'm perfect and really interesting and stuff. And like, I think objectively speaking, you are better at charming new people or like meeting new people than I am. So it's interesting that we have such different experiences around that. And I'm sure there's probably some like male privilege elements there. Maybe, yeah. That like I'm sort of just like socialized to like show up and be like, here's everything that's great about me, and I'm going to tell you what I think about things, and blah, blah, blah. Oh, yeah, maybe I'm too deep down this rabbit hole, because that's not something I'm necessarily, like, used to or super comfortable doing, but dating has made me more so. Mm-hmm. And so it is, like, sort of an affirming, like, I feel like through non-monogamy, I've been able to be more, like, of a, like, masculine archetype in that way, or, like, explore how to be that way. Mm-hmm. When previous to that, I was, like, more shy about new people. Mm-hmm. And when we would meet new people together, I would kind of, like, let you do that.
That's true. That's interesting.
But anyway, that's all a lot of, you know, whatever, other context, but like...
But, so do you feel jealous or scared in
well, yeah,
any relatable way?
Here's the thing. I do. I am capable of that, but I think because I know how genuine your feeling of skepticism is, and you say things like, and I quote, I feel like I'm just a 200-year-old woman in rags who's going to show up to the date and dressed in rags.
And I think what I said was, and then I'll cough because I've had the flu and dust will come out.
Yeah. And so,
it's not the sexiest feeling in the world, okay?
I know that that's not true, and that's not how you're going to present, but also I know that's an authentic feeling that you're having, and so it's hard for me to imagine, like, you know, and then she's going to fall deeply in love with that person and just text me that she's running away together, you know? Like, I know how authentic that feeling is, and I know how much you love me and feel safe with me, and so...
And who wouldn't want to just text the 200-year-old woman in rags who coughs dust that you're going to go start another family with somebody else?
Wait, no, you're texting me in this scenario.
Anyway, Jessica.
Does a 200-year-old woman in rags even know how to send a text? I mean...
Yeah.
This is all getting a little ageist also.
It is.
I'm sorry. Of course
it's not like 200-year-old women in rags who
it's 2023.
Cough dust don't also deserve love and to go on dates.
True.
Yeah. Also, yes, with other 200-year-old women or men. I can't wait until I'm 200.
I guess, but I kind of want to like just see how much of like a direct like parallel of your two experiences we can have, you know, like what does it feel like to you, Alex, when you're like scrolling through the profile of someone Sarah's about to go on a date with on a dating app?
This is a great question. I mean, it's definitely different when it's men or women, but I think there's like, I think I have a compersion feeling. Like when I look at dudes compersion is a real poly word that people like to use about, which I guess means like the feeling of happiness at your partner's happiness, or like that somebody you love is experiencing joy or something.
Yeah.
But maybe that's bullshit. Maybe it's more like, maybe it's more self-centered in some way. I don't know. You're not.
How would it be more self-centered, Alex?
Because I know that you're having these hard feelings around your dates. It can't be like pure compersion, because like, you know,
that would require that I was
that would require you to be experiencing joy. Exactly. But I am like excited, like when the people that you're dating, like when you're going out on a date with a man and I look at his profile and I'm like, when I can see how he's like attractive or appealing, I'm usually kind of pumped about that. And I'm not exactly, or with a woman, and I'm not exactly sure why, but it's maybe more like I'm like, you're like my avatar out there dating. I feel like I get to be dating them because you are, or something.
Oh, that's interesting. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well,
what is the shitty self-centered motivation you assume I have?
No, I wasn't assuming anything. I think just maybe there's a little bit of wanting me to have the same experience as you.
Yeah.
So that you can then enjoy that experience more.
Yes, and not feel like I'm doing, not feel guilty like I'm doing something. Yeah, ding, ding, ding. I think that's definitely what it is. Yeah. Which brings us back to that, like, fear shame dynamic that I think you're kind of saying like shows up with clients a lot too.
And I think it gets us to this question of how this can feel really hard and kind of intractable. And even when you've done work on it and it's gotten better, like we don't have the same kind of hot fights around this stuff. It's not as disruptive or as dysregulating as it once was in the beginning.
Yeah.
It's still there, and
Yeah.
it probably will be in some way, shape, or form forever.
Yeah.
And non-monogamy is a very easy place to activate it. Like, if you want something that's going to get you right into that dynamic as quickly as possible, non-monogamy is an easy place to get there. It's an easy way to get there.
No shit, like Jessica was saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's gonna, if you have challenging dynamics around shame and fear, sex, intimacy, love, fear of abandonment, fear of comparison, all of that stuff is just there, available. And so I think the question that we've asked each other in those moments, and I've heard my clients ask, which is, why don't we just stop? Or why don't I not go on this date? How do we think about that question? I mean, it seems like a natural question to ask if it's just like, oh my God, this really sucks. And even if we do a lot of hard work, it's probably always going to be here in some way, shape, or form. Why are we still being non-monogamous? Why would you still go on that date? Why is it that every time we ask that question, we still conclude that we want to, and I always want you to go on that date?
I think we should try to answer that question after the break.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yay. Okay. How's it going?
Okay, so coming back from the break, I have a question for you guys, which is, I have this idea in my head that like every couple, like when they fight, they're like actually, you know, the fight might be about like one thing this day and another thing the other day, whatever, but like basically you're having the same fight every time. I feel like that's been my experience. Is that a thing? Is that, and like the fight you guys had last night, is it that one fight?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question to be asking, and it kind of gets at the heart of what I think we're talking about in this podcast, which is, yeah, I think couples are usually having the same fight over and over again with different topics. And I think non-monogamy, because it's a more rare way to have a relationship and it's not culturally sanctioned, it's really easy to think the reason why we're fighting is the non-monogamy. And if we were to extract the non-monogamy from the picture, we wouldn't be having this fight. Right? Like and I think that's why really commonly you and I and couples that I see in my practice will be like, why don't we just stop? If we just stopped non-monogamy, we wouldn't be having this fight. And it never sits right with me.
Yeah.
I'm like, I just feel like that's not true.
Right. And maybe you can't, close Pandora's box or whatever, but also it's because you're just going to be back in the same place that you were before. It's not like it's gonna solve the problem because you're still going to be having that same fight.
Right, and it'll show up in some other dynamic. I remember one of my, was it in my like family systems class in graduate school? We were talking about the most common conflict in relationships and couples in particular. And I had a professor who was like, look, it's money, it's sex, it's parenting, and it's household duties. And I think you could say parenting or caregiving and household duties. That is what people fight about. I think you could argue that below those topics, there is actually an emotional dynamic, like we were describing earlier, the fear, shame, for example, that gets kicked off. That is actually the bedrock, the emotional bedrock of what's going on.
Yeah. So we were looking for examples of like cultural representations of non-monogamy where we could like see this kind of fight that we had or our dynamic play out. And they're, first of all, surprisingly hard to find where it's not like kind of a plot device for some other kind of psychodrama. But I went back to that show, Scenes from a Marriage, that was like a remake of
so good.
like a Swedish movie or what Ingmar Bergman movie. And
it was a redo with Jessica Chastain and
Oscar Isaac.
Yeah.
And they famously made it seem like they were actually romantically involved IRL at the premiere.
I still choose to believe that they are.
Definitely.
And I
It's
will
all
not
true. The
unchoose
whole
that
show
reality. For
It was
the rest
actually
of
a
my life.
documentary. And in the first episode, they're with a couple, a non-monogamous couple who's friends of theirs, and they're probably like the non-monogamous couple are probably kind of like a prop for, their relationship dynamics or to help them like play it out. But it's also like a really interesting demonstration of like non-monogamous people fighting. So let's watch that clip and see if we can see what the like root fight is.
Yeah, but there's so many other relationship models. I mean, it's a new era. Take us, for example. She should have met with us.
Well, I'm happy to give her your number, Peter, if you're interested. She's desperate for research subjects.
By all means, I think she could benefit a lot from
But
us.
she's interested in successful marriages. I think that rules us out, baby.
I don't think that's true.
Okay, hey, I'm sorry.
Wait, so how was Boulder?
Oh, yeah.
It's good. We won the pitch.
Hey, that's great!
Yeah.
Cheers, congrats! Fantastic.
Guys?
Yeah, actually, we killed it. I don't think they were looking for a boutique company, but they fell in love with Kate's demos.
Of course they did. She's a genius. There's no better web designer in the entire East Coast. I've said that multiple
No
times.
argument here. And, I didn't fuck up the presentation too badly, so...
Yeah.
You sure?
Good on you.
You sure?
We were a well-oiled machine.
That's great, guys. I'm jealous of you. I am. I get jealous of them. I
Don't
just
be
think they're like
too-
a couple that can work together.
Don't be
is
too jealous.
Like no, I'm sure it's not always easy, but when it works, that's like the
Easy. I mean, the fact that we got through Boulder without killing each other is a miracle.
Let's not do this now.
Why not?
It's just not the time for it.
Okay. So when we're alone, it's not the time. Maybe you can give some thought to when the right time might be.
Just stop, okay?
Okay, it's fine. Let's go home. I'm not
what are you
playing make
about?
believe.
Kate?
Don't leave.
What's happening? What's going on, Peter?
It's nothing important. It's just the usual drama about...
Don't say it's not important though. Fuck you. Okay. What's going on is Nathan broke up with me, and I'm extremely depressed about it. Peter can't deal with it. He won't talk about it. So that's what's going on. And
Kate, cut it out.
cut it out. You cut it out. All of these. I'm so sick of this social fascism. Like bullshit.
Social
Empty
fascism.
conversations. I'm allowed to talk about everything but the most important thing going on in my life. I'm not going to do it anymore.
Maybe they don't really feel like hearing about it.
No.
Consider that.
No. You're the only one that doesn't want to hear about it. Because you'd rather wallow in your passive-aggressive bullshit, resentment. You can't admit that you're hurting, that it hurts, and just talk to me about it.
Yeah, I'm hurt, okay? I'm very hurt. I admit it, okay? Can we end this now?
Okay, no, we can't end this. And I won't live like this, okay? When we started this, we said that we would talk about everything, and I was there. Through all your shit with Alana, Grace, I accepted that. I dealt with that. And now suddenly when I'm the one that's going through something, it's like my feelings aren't legitimate.
I never fell in love with anyone else. That's the difference.
Okay. So what if I fell in love? That was supposed to be a part of the risk we both accepted. I'm not leaving. I'm here. I'm dealing with it.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Guys.
No, guys.
Oh, God. So you care more about what they think about you than what I'm going through right now. You're so pathetic.
I think it's a real competition as to who's most pathetic right now.
Let's take a break. I'm gonna go upstairs. Why don't you come upstairs with me?
Oh my God.
I think it's a real
Devastating.
competition about who's most pathetic right now. That actually seems like something that I've said before.
I have such mixed feelings about. I really don't want to be the couple fighting at that dinner party, and I really do want to be the couple watching them fight. I'm just like Oscar Isaacs at one point.
Yeah.
He's just pouring a giant glass of wine, and I'm like, that's me. It's like
He's eating the popcorn, yeah. So you're relating more to the guy and the non-monogamous couple in that, like you said, you really don't want to be the person who is like having that fight. in front of other people. I was trying to like figure out who we are in that.
Well, we do have a podcast where we're literally talking about a fight we had last night in front of people. Lots of people. So
you're ashamed to show your true self to the world, Sarah.
My favorite line in that, I'm so sick of this social fascism, which is just...
You're just going to start saying that, huh?
I love it. I think I can relate to both people in the couple for different reasons. But maybe the more interesting question to ask here is, what were they fighting about, really? What do you two think? I mean, what did they say they're fighting about, and then what do you think they're fighting about, really?
Yeah, I mean, when she said that social fascism line, you know, you're just like, oh, this is not the first time she has said that. Right. This has come up before. Right. This feels like a familiar groove, right?
Yeah, which is like she doesn't want what she says to be controlled.
Right.
Right. And then then before that, at the beginning, she makes a joke about like how their marriage is bad. And then he's like acts really hurt by that. And that kind of opens the door for them to like talk about their shit, which are the thing that he claims to not really want to do. But like, that's when it gets like really serious. So I think there's like a dynamic there around like, you know, him not feeling loved, right? Or like being afraid that she doesn't love him. She loves this other person, Nathan, and it doesn't feel to him like those two things are possible at once, or like her being depressed about Nathan breaking up with her is like an indication is really hurtful to him and difficult, but he doesn't want to talk about it.
Right. And there's some sense that they've been non-monogamous and there's been an agreement that there's not emotional involvement.
Which is
and that agreement has been broken.
Very common and always works great. I don't think it ever gets broken. That's really unrealistic.
Super good idea, everybody.
Yeah. Really easy to prevent that. And then she's trying to be emotionally vulnerable, like at this dinner party, and like talk about her feelings, right? And feeling shamed by him for like wanting to expose their
business
feelings.
And almost you get the sense that he's like, you're creating these feelings by talking about them. And she's kind of calling him out on that. Because it's like, well, it's not a good time when it's just us, and it's not a good time when we're around other people. And you're making me feel, there's social fascism, that I'm the one creating this problematic dynamic because I want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and I think that like at the core, like the root thing is, you know, doubts about being loved. Like whether the other person loves you. And I think actually now that I'm remembering, it's been a year since that show came out and like we watched it. But like the core couple, Jessica and Oscar, whatever their names are in the show, I think it follows them for like several years. And I think for the first part of it, the dynamic is that he feels like she doesn't love him.
Right.
And then at some point that dynamic flips. But isn't that always like kind of the core dynamic? Or like the core to any fight is like, where any couple is like the fear by one party or the other, or maybe both, that they aren't loved by the other person.
Loved or lovable.
Yeah.
I think it is. And I think if you excavate down through the different layers, you know, at first glance, they're talking about non-monogamy and how it's not working for them or is a struggle for them in some way.
Right.
And then below that, you hear these dynamics about fear, I think probably from the husband, that he doesn't deserve the wife, she killed the pitch, she like has fallen in love with someone else, their friends think that she's the best web designer on the East Coast, and so there's like a flip of gender dynamics there, and you can just like feel his insecurity, and then when she makes a flip comment about their failed marriage, right, or their marriage not being successful, he's getting activated, right?
Yeah.
How do you see her fearing that she's not lovable? And I guess I'd ask both of you that, as you like, how would you excavate down through those issues to that baseline fear?
I mean, that he doesn't want to. It's like he's rejecting her. She feels like he's rejecting her in not wanting to talk about what's going on, and like her feeling of like sadness about her relationship ending. He can't accept that feeling, or he can't deal with it, and so I could see how that would indicate to her like he doesn't actually love her. Mm-hmm. He just, wants everything to be okay, but wants her feelings to be like controlled.
Yeah, there's some kind of control of feelings. Like, she's not to be totally trusted. Her feelings aren't to be trusted. Mm-hmm. You can see that she's like, I have sought support from you around this hard experience, and you've shut me down.
Right.
Now I'm seeking support from our best friends, and you're shutting me down.
Yeah.
Right.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. What does this have to do with us?
Right. Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing at all.
Go ahead, Jessica.
Yeah, no. I was just I think going into the break, we asked this question of, it sounds hard. Why don't you just stop? And then we realized, wait, okay, we got to talk about this. Like, we've got some more things to discuss before we can really answer that question. But I mean, so are we concluding here that this fight is about non-monogamy or not about non-monogamy?
That's the context, that's the setting, but I don't think that's what it's about. And I think for us, I wanted to, I've thought of a couple of examples for where these dynamics that we have inside of non-monogamy and like first dates that we were describing up top are kind of like flipped, or they're kind of different.
And I guess maybe as a setup and to draw on my clients here a little bit, I have found myself asking them when they're just like, we're having the same fight over and over again in non-monogamy, and we'll try and do some of that excavation, and yet it still is showing up. And I'll say, what do you think you would be fighting about if it weren't non-monogamy? If you did stop because you're just like sick to death of having this fight, and you're just like, nope, we're not doing this anymore, I'm done, I just can't feel this feeling one more time. What do you think you'd be fighting about, if anything? So I guess I offer that up because I'm kind of asking you, what do you think we might be fighting about?
Well, what did we used to fight about before we were non-monogamous? I mean, the things that I had in mind were, because I was realizing I am capable of jealousy in your other relationships. Usually it's not, ones that are very new, maybe because of that like skepticism and the feelings that you're bringing to new relationships. But then you have like a lot of very established, somewhat, I guess, platonic relationships that like predate us, our, relationship officially being open, but like they're very intimate. I think we've talked about this on the podcast before. And I am jealous of those relationships for sure. And like feel like starved for your attention relative to them and stuff like that. So I don't think that jealousy is just not there on my side. And then the other one is, you said couples always fight about money. And when we fight about money, I think these were the dynamics are really, those like fear, shame dynamics are really flipped. I can describe my part of that.
Yeah.
It's sometimes like around money stuff, I'll just feel like really out of control. And like, I get sort of panicked, like, we don't have enough money, we need to, like tighten our belts or whatever. We need to like figure out something like, some way to make more money or spend less money or whatever. And I feel like really, like pretty panicked around that and pretty like, and it's not really logical, or it's not really like one day I'll feel like that and another day I won't feel like that. And the difference between those 2 days in terms of like our actual financial situation is nothing. Right. It's something will activate me and I'll just be like, oh shit.
And that can be very similar to like me being activated about non-monogamy.
Right. And then
it's
I'll be like,
you're just continuing to do what you do with non-monogamy, like I'm continuing to do what I do with money or what we've agreed upon together.
Right.
And then there will be an intersection of stressors for you where you're like, Sarah, this money stuff is out of control.
Yeah.
You've got it. What are you doing? Stop. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
But this is also, money doesn't exist and it doesn't matter and we'll be fine no matter what. And you're like, that's insane.
Yeah. We're going to die.
And then I'm like, are you calling me insane? Do you not trust me?
Yeah. So talk a little bit more about that side of it. Like when I'm like, Sarah, we're running out of money. What are we going to do? We have to change. Or like, maybe I'm not like, what are we going to do? I'm like, here's what we have to do. I'm freaking out. Like, how is that for you and how do you think you respond?
Well, I guess it's interesting. There's a couple of ways. Sometimes it like won't activate me and I'll just be like, oh, yeah, I understand you being afraid about that. I know that that freaks you out. That makes sense. You know, we just like put Christmas on a credit card or whatever. And we have been able to sometimes have discussions where we like work through it together.
Okay.
But more commonly, I'll just be like, wait, what happened? Like, we're just doing the thing that we agreed on. And I am doing that same thing, and now you're freaking out about money. And I am, like, trying to catch up with you on this freak out train, and I don't know how to. And now I feel like I've been made the bad guy, and you don't trust me, and, like, you think that I'm irresponsible, and, you know. And I'll be like, we've been together and had shared money for 20 years, Alex. Like, why all of a sudden are you, like, not trusting me with it,
You
or
feel
thinking
like
I'm
I'm
the
saying
source of
that
the
you're
problem?
doing something wrong.
I'm doing something wrong,
even
yeah.
though it's kind of like what we've agreed upon, and maybe that your like desires are out of control, or they could be. Like, I don't trust you to be in control around that topic, or like
Right.
Yeah.
And you don't sort of see me as an equal partner in it.
Right.
And
Which
even
is-
if you go back and roll tape, like you did, where you're like, so don't you have a date with an attractive younger woman this week? And I'm like, that's not the same.
Right.
You know, if we go back and roll tape on money, I'll be like, I don't spend that much money. I don't spend any more money than you do. And you're like, that's not the point.
Yeah.
Right? Because my feelings about it are different.
Yeah, exactly. Because I feel guilty when I spend money.
I don't.
And you should too. Yeah. So that's like, I feel like that's an exact like reverse parallel to what the dynamics we were talking about before. And it's so interesting to think about that, and for me to like think about that and realize that like, oh, I'm capable, I can like totally relate to the feelings that you're having around dating if I put myself in the position that I feel around money.
Yeah. Money, or it sounds like sometimes like platonic long-term
Sure.
relationships.
Yeah.
I love this so much because I think I've had such a hard time like trying to imagine what it would feel like to not have like shame around sex or non-monogamy or something like that. But I think I'm the same way as you, Sarah, about money, where I really think it's a construct and I don't care about it at all. And I feel I don't have shame around money. Certainly a lot less, I think, than most people I know.
And
so it's just
lest
so
the world suspect that it's because we have a lot of money.
Oh no,
It's not.
very broke. Always have been. Always will be.
Until we monetize this
But
podcast.
until we monetize.
Hey. 2023 goals.
Yeah, but it's such an interesting
Yeah.
parallel. And do you think? I mean, is that useful to you guys? Like, I think was this a recent realization between the two of you?
Yeah.
Is it helpful?
I mean, the pattern is not recent. The pattern is like as old as our relationship, basically. But the realization for me about how my feelings about that reflected your feelings about this other thing where I thought I couldn't understand you was very useful.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, oh yeah, panic that you feel like is completely like rational and makes total sense, but the other person doesn't understand at all.
Right. And then as they're scrambling to catch up with the panic, they start feeling activated.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry, are you blaming me?
Yeah.
Is it my fault now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the fact is, sometimes I am blaming you.
I know.
And it's not fair. And I don't know if that goes the other way with dating. but
Sometimes
yeah.
I'm blaming you. Yeah, I do find this helpful. I guess as a non-monogamous person, as a person in a lot of like lifelong relationships and long-term relationships, and as a therapist, you kind of get down to this really like, what is the word I'm looking for? It's like when you look at something
Like fundamental?
to the fundamentals,
Foundational?
or it's like to the atom level of it, right? And ask yourself, like, what do you want your relationships to look and feel like? What do you expect of a relationship that feels good? Are there no fights in it, right? Or is it that the fights are fights that are like meaningful, or reveal something, or where you can like learn something about yourself or the other person? What is your tolerance for all of that? You know, it's like it gets really interesting to me at that level.
Yeah. I mean, do you see couples who say that they don't fight? Or I'm curious what your take on that is. Like, is not fighting a good sign?
I don't think there are any couples that don't fight.
Yeah, it's just like how
It's how they fight.
they fight. Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes the fight is sometimes maybe couples don't fight because one party refuses to engage with
Yes.
the conflict, like was happening
Yes.
in the clip.
Yeah, and there's a way, it's really complex that, some folks might pathologize any kind of conflict and might avoid it
Right.
at all costs. And to them, any sort of conflict is a sign that a relationship is in distress or they have like a
Right.
very low tolerance for it. And also, their kind of refusal to engage in any conflict is a form of conflict.
Right. And I think that's really like sort of familial or cultural, like
Totally.
what are you like sort of attuned to based on your childhood experience and stuff like that.
And then the flip side of that is you don't want to be having just like hot, disruptive, dysregulating fights all the time. Most people, that's not the relationship they want to be in either.
Yeah.
And most relationships will go through some periods of that until you hit a place where you're like, nope, I don't think either of us have any more tolerance for this. We've got to find some other way. Which doesn't mean you like solve or resolve all of the root dynamics around it, but maybe it's just you try and understand them more deeply.
Yeah, and I think that I was just going to ask you what you think the sort of like mistake is around this or the lesson for us. And regardless of what you say, I don't think the answer is going to be, or once you know the lesson, then you don't do this anymore. I don't think we're going to stop having that kind of fight.
No.
Because, or like playing out those dynamics because we recognize them, right? They don't just go away. It's more like you can see that they're happening and I don't know, still do them in spite of knowing exactly what you're doing.
Well, I think maybe it's about hopefully they feel generative and productive, right? That you're like learning something or understanding something or offering care to yourself or the other person more often than not.
Yeah.
Right? Fights that are just like consistently destructive and upsetting and hurtful are really different than fights that feel like they can be generative and you can learn something. And it doesn't mean that you're not going to fight.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that all fights are going to be generative and you're going to learn something. But for that to be a language you can speak in conflict, I think is valuable and makes relationships more fulfilling.
Yeah. So when I said, you quoted me up top as saying, do we have to do this every time? Maybe the answer is most of the time, sometimes, but that's okay because we're going to try to do it in a generative way, not in a whatever.
In a way that's cruel to each other or ourselves.
Yeah.
Or destructive to each other or ourselves. And I think when we talk about attachment, which we talk about a lot on this podcast, attached relationships where people rely on each other and trust each other and show each other their most vulnerable sides, are relationships where you are drawn to each other for the things that feel like easy and good and beautiful and like expansive and wonderful, and you're also drawn to each other for the work that you're going to do together. There is no attached relationship, no meaningful relationship where people rely on each other where they're not also signing up to do some kind of work together.
Yeah, and maybe knowing that you know how to do that work with the other person or trust the other person or like think that it's worth it is really, what is like fundamental to a relationship being good. Also a great argument for why you would never go on a first date and then text the other person and be like, oh, I found the person. They're perfect. And like.
And I do say this to myself and to couples a lot where I'll be like, you're signing up for like wonderful times and growth and like beautiful chemistry. And you're also signing up for work. And you don't have to do that work together. You can decide that this is not the work you want to do or this is not the partner you want to do it with, right? But like, I think being able to be in choice with that and engage with that as also an expression of love is valuable and also speaks to building a sense of security in a relationship.
So like bringing this back to mistake or like kind of a lesson learned for us or for other couples, opening their marriages. It seems like the conclusion is kind of like, don't blame non-monogamy for the problem, right? And don't blame it for the problem like from the perspective of like the way that you feel insecure about like my love for you. That might be there regardless. Certainly could see how it would be like intensified by me dating other people.
I think like there's non-monogamy comes with it an intensification of dynamics and of like ones you have with partners and ones you have like even inside yourself. So I think you can, in a way, blame non-monogamy for the intensification of that, but it didn't create those dynamics.
Right. Yeah.
And I also would say to people, this is not like an argument for you should be non-monogamous or you should stay non-monogamous if it doesn't feel right to you. But I think it's more of an invitation to look a little beyond an easy straw man, an easy cultural straw man to say like, is the source of the conflict actually the non-monogamy? Or is this just like a shortcut to some really like deep and powerful, challenging and potentially generative dynamics in your life?
Yeah. And I guess like for me, my fear that, that there's like something wrong with me or like shame, like feelings of shame or, that I'm doing, that I'm bad and I'm going to be rejected for that existed prior to non-monogamy. And those are like feelings that I have internally. Certainly it feels like it puts a finer point on those. But, they were there before. It's those feelings aren't caused by non-monogamy. And I wouldn't, if we, were monogamous and like kind of followed the rules around that stuff, I would find something else to feel that way about, or would feel that way about just like the desire.
Right. And I would say similarly for me, the fear that I will ultimately be abandoned or left by the people who are most important to me was going to be there whether or not I was non-monogamous. That was going to be like some of the work that I had to do over the course of my life, no matter what. And it's going to be some of the most intense work I do with a primary partner, the co-parent to my children, and my husband. And there's no avoiding the work, I think, is what I'm saying. I was thinking of a good friend of ours, Morgan, the other day. We were talking about hard times. I think a lot of our friends have been going through some hard times. We all experienced like a loss recently. There's been some illness. There's just been some struggles, right? And Morgan was saying, I don't want to get into a conversation about like who has more hard than others. I think you can just say that that is true in many cases, right? But what's more interesting to me is what do people do with the hard that they get? And that has more to do with their ability to enjoy life than anything else. And I think that shows up for couples or relationships too. There's going to be hard. What do you do with the hard that you get? There's not a relationship you're going to find where there isn't hard. So I think that's like helpful for me.
That was almost directly a Mr. Rogers quote.
Shit, really?
What does he say?
He said so there's something about like what do you do with the mad that you feel? So I guess it's a little bit different, but it's like
what does he say you do with it?
Well, he's asking
It's
you
in a song.
like
I throw my husband's phone on the bed.
Yeah. Toss gently.
Toss it gently.
But
and I say, why are they all so pretty?
Right. The feelings are going to be there anyway, he's saying, but it's the way that you express them.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess like that gets to the why do you not stop, right? That's the question we're trying to answer here. I'm wondering, do we have anything else to say about that? Like, why does it not feel right to stop even when the non-monogamy is the like subject of the heart.
I mean, my first answer is like, because it's fun and I like it. But then there's your answer, and then my real answer is a response to your answer, I think.
Let me see. This is what I'm hearing. You
Yes,
tell me if I'm
please.
on the right track. Okay. So I think like the conversation kind of goes like this, like, okay, here's non-monogamy. Whoa, it's really complicated. And sometimes I feel jealous, or, you know, I got to go on a lot of first dates or whatever. It's hard. It's complicated. Why don't you just stop? But what I'm hearing is that, like, sure, some of the like logistics about how it's hard and complicated, those would go away. You wouldn't have to schedule childcare and dates. But beyond that, like, it's not actually, it's not asking the right question to say, why don't you just stop? Because, you know, it's going to reveal things that are going on for you personally or you as a couple, regardless of the non-monogamy. So it's kind of like two separate questions. Like, do you want to be a non-monogamous person, or are you a non-monogamous person? Versus, like, do you have challenges in your primary relationship that you need to address?
Right.
Or with yourself that you need to address?
That's super helpful, because I think the answer that I want to give is I want to be thoughtful and intentional and engaged and authentic in my attached relationships and in my relationships in general. Non-monogamy has given me a very powerful framework for doing that. And it's not the only way you could do it, but for me, it has been a really like powerful way of staying mindful of that all the time, and of like my inclination to think that love is this like really scarce commodity and that you have to constantly be hoarding it, or my fear that like if you don't play by the rules, you'll be left behind, or that, you know, you can't count on people. Or that love is like not flexible and dynamic and something that we get to create together, but something that is prescribed and you either win or lose, right? So I want to be engaging with those questions because the quality of my life and my ability to enjoy it and my relationships really hinge on the way I engage with those challenging, that challenging material. And so I'm grateful to have something in my life that is a framework that really like encourages me to do that regularly.
Yeah.
And I guess like a few other things I was thinking about and answer that question. It allows me for like my weirdness and my queerness to be forward facing. So it's not like I'm trying to pretend outwardly to be something that I'm not, only to then like slowly reveal to people that I'm a weirdo that lives in weird ways. So I think it's been like integrative for me in that way. It relieves the pressure that I might feel to be a perfect partner in a monogamous relationship and know that I would not be able to be, and then feel panicked about that and that I would be left as a result. And then just like being able to develop my own like autonomous orientation towards like sex and intimacy and learn about myself and bring that back to my relationships. So that's like a long way of saying, yeah, I don't like first dates very much. Not yours, not mine. I don't like them. And at first glance, you might think, then why the absolute fuck would you ever be non-monogamous? And why would you keep answering that question of, do you want to stop with, no, I don't want to stop. I think that's my long answer for that.
Yeah. It takes me back to like when we first opened our marriage, a lot of people's initial reaction is like, don't fuck with that. Don't mess with it. And like, I think there are a lot of reasons to be monogamous, but I don't think for us that's a good one at all, because what they're really saying is don't engage with the stuff that's there beneath the surface. Yeah, it's too dangerous.
Yeah,
it's too nuclear. And we both...
You're like, oh wait, what'd you say?
Yeah, well, it's not like we want to like kick the bear or whatever the saying is. But it's like we're going to be thinking about the things that are there below the surface no matter what, and we want to be. So you can't just, we don't want to live in a way that's just like, oh, we just won't acknowledge those things. Right. And like then they'll go away.
Like the poor husband in the clip.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I hope he's okay.
I do too. I think they're gonna break up. Actually,
I do too.
I think they go upstairs and then the lady puts the moves on Jessica Chastain. Right?
Yeah,
After we're done, I will watch the rest.
Yeah.
I don't even remember. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember that very well. And they're like, she has on like these, anyway, they're like silk sheets involved. And I was
made
like,
an
what?
impression on Sarah.
Anyway,
Yeah,
sorry.
and I think that like my offer to stop is like that we could is like expressed out of like love for you and wanting to, not like see you suffer because of my own actions or our sort of actions together. But I know on some level that you want to be exploring this and having these experiences, and so I would definitely hesitate to like completely slam on the brakes even when it gets hard, because I know that would actually be like taking away your opportunity to do that and would be harmful to you and us, because it would be just like putting it back below the surface.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
That's a good way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
I like that. What do you think, Jess? You buying this?
Yeah, I'm buying it. I know, and I really do. I mean, I think I have had this question in the back of my mind throughout this whole project of you guys.
I'll bet you have.
And by project, I mean your life. But this really, it like helps me see it in a new way. So, yeah. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for figuring this all
Yeah.
out and sharing it.
Thanks for
with us.
stepping in and playing the role basically of the couples therapist on this episode. You did a great job.
It'll be
Yeah.
$175, please.
That's a steal. It's a steal for you to be
well-
my couples therapist.
And thank you for listening to Mistakes to Remain. If you like the podcast, please subscribe on your podcast platform of choice and follow us on Instagram. The handle is MistakesCast. And we'll be back in 2 weeks.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank
It
you.
was great to be here today. Thanks, Alex. And Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year. Love you.
Love you.